a devoted family maid, discovers her employer's new wife, plotting to poison two innocent children for their inheritance, leaving her torn between loyalty and conscience. But 6 months later, when she finally finds the courage to expose the truth, what she reveals in that courtroom testimony saves 2 young lives and exposes one of the most calculated schemes ever conceived against grieving children. Rosa Martinez had worked for the Blackwood family for 8 years, watching 12-year-old Isabella and 10-year-old Marcus grow from toddlers into bright, loving children. She had wiped away their tears when their mother, Catherine, lost her battle with cancer 2 years earlier. She had held them close during those dark months when their father, Richard, struggled to function while drowning in grief. Rosa became more than hired help. She became their guardian angel, their constant source of comfort in a world that had suddenly become cold and uncertain. But nothing could have prepared Rosa for what she would witness when Richard brought home his new wife, Victoria Sterling, just 18 months after Catherine's death. What started as subtle changes in household dynamics would eventually reveal itself as something far more dangerous, a methodical plan that would shake Rosa to her core and force her to make the most difficult decision of her life. The woman Richard thought would bring healing to his broken family was actually planning to destroy what remained of it, and only Rosa stood between 2 innocent children and a fate too horrible to imagine. The Blackwood mansion sat proudly on Elmwood Drive in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Connecticut, its red brick facade and white columns reflecting old money and established tradition. Richard Blackwood, a successful investment banker, had built his fortune through careful planning and strategic thinking, but when it came to matters of the heart, he proved far less astute. At 42, he was a man devastated by loss, struggling to raise 2 children while managing a demanding career that required constant travel and attention. Isabella, with her mother's gentle brown eyes and quiet intelligence, had stepped into a premature role of responsibility after Catherine's death. She helped her younger brother Marcus with homework, reminded him to brush his teeth, and often tucked him into bed when their father worked late. Marcus, energetic and trusting, still asked when Mommy was coming home, not fully grasping the permanence of death, despite the many gentle explanations he had received. Rosa had been Catherine's choice when the children were small. Catherine specifically sought someone who would love her children as her own, someone with the patience and wisdom to guide them through life's challenges. Rosa, then 35 and unable to have children of her own, poured all her maternal instincts into caring for Isabella and Marcus. She taught them Spanish lullabies, helped with school projects, and created elaborate birthday celebrations that filled the house with laughter. When Catherine fell ill, Rosa became her closest confidant, promising to always protect and cherish the children no matter what happened. The year following Catherine's death brought countless challenges. Richard threw himself into work, often leaving before dawn and returning after the children were asleep. Rosa essentially became a single parent, managing everything from school pickups to doctor appointments. She watched Richard's grief consume him, saw how he barely functioned despite his successful professional facade. When he began dating again, Rosa hoped it would bring some happiness back into his life and provide the children with the motherly figure they desperately missed. Victoria Sterling appeared to be the answer to their prayers. At 34, she was polished, articulate, and seemingly devoted to Richard. She had worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative before meeting Richard at a charity gala, and she spoke eloquently about wanting to help heal his broken family. During their courtship, Victoria was attentive to the children, bringing them thoughtful gifts and listening patiently to their stories. She complimented Rosa's cooking and expressed gratitude for her dedication to the family. The wedding took place in the backyard garden that Catherine had lovingly designed, a detail that made Rosa uncomfortable but which Richard insisted Catherine would have wanted. Victoria wore ivory silk and carried white roses, the same flowers Catherine had chosen for her own wedding 15 years earlier. Isabella served as flower girl, with obvious reluctance, while Marcus walked his father down the aisle with innocent enthusiasm, believing this new arrangement would somehow bring back the happiness their family had lost. Initially, the transition seemed smooth. Victoria moved into the master bedroom that had remained unchanged since Catherine's death, finally prompting Richard to pack away his first wife's belongings. She redecorated the living spaces with contemporary furniture and bold artwork, explaining that the family needed to move forward rather than living in a shrine to the past. The children adapted to calling her Victoria, rather than any variation of mother, an arrangement that seemed to suit everyone involved. Rosa noticed the first troubling signs within weeks of the wedding. Victoria would speak sweetly to the children when Richard was present, but her tone became sharp and impatient when he left for work. She criticized Isabella's study habits and Marcus's table manners, implementing strict rules about noise levels and requiring them to ask permission before entering common areas of their own home. When Rosa gently suggested that the children were still adjusting and needed patience, Victoria responded with a cold smile and reminded her that child-rearing decisions were no longer her responsibility. The changes began subtly, like shadows lengthening as daylight faded. Victoria started rearranging the children's schedules, insisting they needed more structure and discipline. She enrolled them in additional tutoring sessions and weekend activities that kept them away from home for longer periods. When Isabella complained about feeling tired all the time, Victoria suggested she was simply lazy and needed to develop better work habits. When Marcus began having difficulty concentrating in school, Victoria blamed Rosa's cooking for making him sluggish and took over meal planning entirely. Rosa watched with growing concern as the children's vibrant personalities began to dim. Isabella, once chatty and curious, became withdrawn and spent most of her time in her room. Marcus stopped asking to play outside and seemed content to sit quietly for hours. Unusual behavior for a typically energetic 10-year-old. Both children developed frequent headaches and complained of stomach problems, symptoms Victoria dismissed as attention-seeking behavior designed to manipulate their father. The phone calls started 3 months after the wedding. Rosa first noticed them during her evening cleaning routine, hearing Victoria's hushed voice coming from the study after Richard had gone to bed. The conversations were brief and cryptic, consisting mainly of Victoria saying yes or no in response to questions Rosa could not hear. When Rosa mentioned hearing the phone ring late at night, Victoria claimed she had been talking to her sister on the West Coast, where the time difference made evening calls necessary. Victoria's behavior toward Rosa also changed dramatically. She began questioning Rosa's methods, criticizing everything from her cleaning techniques to her interaction with the children. She suggested that Rosa was too emotionally invested in the family and needed to maintain more professional boundaries. Victoria started giving Rosa additional tasks that kept her busy in parts of the house far from where the children spent their time, effectively limiting Rosa's supervision and influence. The most disturbing change involved the children's meals. Victoria insisted on preparing their food personally, claiming that proper nutrition was essential for their development, and that Rosa's traditional cooking was too heavy for growing children. She purchased organic supplements and specialized foods, explaining to Richard that she was implementing a healthier lifestyle for the entire family. Rosa noticed that Victoria always served the children's plates directly, never allowing them to serve themselves or share food with others. Rosa's suspicions deepened when she observed Victoria's interactions with the children when she thought no one was watching. During a particular revealing incident, Rosa witnessed Victoria speaking harshly to Isabella about her declining grades, threatening consequences that seemed disproportionate to the offense. When Isabella began crying, Victoria's expression showed no sympathy, only cold calculation. The moment Richard's car pulled into the driveway, Victoria's demeanor transformed completely, becoming warm and concerned as she comforted the sobbing child. The pharmaceutical knowledge that had made Victoria successful in her previous career began manifesting in concerning ways. She frequently referenced medical studies about children's nutrition and development, always concluding that Isabella and Marcus needed more intervention and supervision. She convinced Richard that both children required regular health monitoring and arranged for frequent visits to a doctor Rosa had never heard of, appointments that took place during Rosa's days off so she could not accompany them. Rosa attempted to discuss her concerns with Richard during one of his brief appearances at home, but her timing proved unfortunate. Victoria was present during the conversation and skillfully redirected the discussion, expressing concern about Rosa's emotional state and suggesting that she might be struggling with the family's transitions. Richard, already overwhelmed by work pressures and grateful for Victoria's apparent devotion to his children, dismissed Rosa's worries as misplaced anxiety about her changing role in the household. The breaking point came when Rosa discovered Victoria researching inheritance laws on the family computer. The search history revealed multiple queries about children's rights, estate planning, and the legal implications of remarriage. Victoria had also researched the effects of various medications and supplements on children, focusing particularly on substances that could cause gradual health decline without obvious symptoms. When Rosa confronted Victoria about these searches, Victoria claimed she was simply trying to ensure the children's financial security and optimal health, but her explanation felt rehearsed and hollow. The truth revealed itself on a rainy Thursday evening in October, 6 months after Victoria's arrival in their lives. Rosa had returned to the house unexpectedly to retrieve her sweater, having left it behind after her shift ended. As she quietly entered through the service entrance, she heard Victoria's voice coming from the kitchen, speaking in the urgent, hushed tones that had become familiar over recent months. "The dosage needs to increase gradually," Victoria was saying into her phone. "We cannot afford any sudden changes that might raise suspicions. Isabella is already showing the right symptoms, but Marcus is more resistant. His body weight requires a different approach." Rosa froze in the hallway, her heart pounding as the implications of these words began to register. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more of the conversation that would shatter her understanding of the woman Richard had married. "No, the doctor I found is completely cooperative. He understands the situation and will document everything exactly as we discussed. Richard trusts medical professionals implicitly, especially when they confirm his worst fears about his children's health." Victoria's laugh was cold and calculating, a sound Rosa had never heard before. "By spring both children will be too sick to recover. Natural causes, genetic weakness from their mother's side. Richard will be devastated, but grateful that I tried everything possible to save them." The phone conversation continued for another 10 minutes, during which Rosa learned the horrifying scope of Victoria's plan. The supplements Victoria had been giving the children contained carefully measured amounts of substances designed to cause gradual organ damage. The frequent doctor visits were with a corrupt physician who was documenting false medical histories to support claims of hereditary illness. Victoria had researched Catherine's medical records extensively, planning to attribute the children's declining health to genetic factors inherited from their deceased mother. Most shocking of all was Victoria's motivation. She had discovered that Richard's will, written shortly after Catherine's death, left his entire estate to Isabella and Marcus, with Victoria receiving only the house and a modest annual allowance. Victoria's plan was to eliminate the children before Richard thought to update his will, ensuring that she would inherit everything as his surviving spouse. She had calculated that 18 to 24 months would provide sufficient time to gradually poison the children, while establishing herself as a devoted stepmother who had done everything possible to save them. Rosa remained hidden until Victoria ended the call and left the kitchen. Her hands shook as she processed what she had witnessed, struggling to comprehend how someone could methodically plan the murder of 2 innocent children for financial gain. Everything suddenly made sense. The specialized meals, the declining health, the mysterious doctor visits, Victoria's insistence on controlling every aspect of the children's care. The next several weeks became a careful balance between protecting the children and gathering evidence. Rosa began documenting everything, photographing the supplements Victoria gave the children, recording dates and times of suspicious phone calls, and secretly collecting samples of the specialized foods Victoria prepared. She researched the doctor Victoria had chosen and discovered he had previously lost his license in another state for falsifying medical records, only recently having it reinstated under questionable circumstances. Rosa faced an agonizing dilemma about how to expose Victoria without endangering the children further. She could not simply approach Richard with accusations, knowing that Victoria had already positioned herself as the caring stepmother, while painting Rosa as an overprotective employee, struggling with change. Rosa needed concrete evidence that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. The breakthrough came when Rosa discovered Victoria's hiding place for the poisonous supplements. While cleaning Victoria's bedroom, Rosa found a locked box hidden behind winter clothes in the walk-in closet. Using skills learned from her own father, a locksmith, Rosa managed to open the box during one of Victoria's shopping trips. Inside, she found detailed notes about dosages, timing, and expected effects, along with correspondence with the corrupt doctor and research about inheritance laws. Most damning of all was Victoria's journal, which documented her entire plan from the initial meeting with Richard through projected timelines for the children's deaths. Victoria had written about her frustration with how long the process was taking and her concern that Rosa was becoming suspicious. The final entry revealed Victoria's backup plan. If the gradual poisoning was discovered, she would claim that Rosa had been drugging the children and that Victoria had been trying to protect them. Armed with undeniable evidence of Victoria's murderous plot, Rosa faced the most critical decision of her life. She could not approach Richard directly, knowing that Victoria had spent months manipulating his perceptions and undermining Rosa's credibility. Instead, Rosa decided to contact the authorities while simultaneously ensuring the children's immediate safety. Rosa's first call was to Detective Patricia Morgan at the local police department, a woman whose own children attended the same school as Isabella and Marcus. Detective Morgan initially expressed skepticism about such serious accusations against a seemingly respectable family, but Rosa's detailed evidence and emotional testimony convinced her to investigate immediately. Rosa provided copies of all the documentation she had gathered, including photographs of the journal entries and samples of the supplements Victoria had been administering. While Detective Morgan began building a case, Rosa took immediate action to protect Isabella and Marcus. She convinced Richard that both children needed a fun weekend away from home, suggesting a visit to her sister's farm in Vermont, where they could enjoy outdoor activities and fresh air. Richard, pleased that Rosa was finally accepting Victoria's presence in their lives, readily agreed to the trip, not realizing that Rosa was literally saving his children's lives. The weekend at the farm served multiple purposes. Rosa arranged for a pediatrician there to examine both children thoroughly, documenting the symptoms of gradual poisoning that Victoria had been causing. The test revealed elevated levels of toxic substances in their blood, providing medical evidence to support the criminal charges that Detective Morgan was preparing. More importantly, the children began feeling better within days of being away from Victoria's carefully controlled environment. Rosa also used this time to gently prepare Isabella and Marcus for what was about to happen. She explained that Victoria had been making them sick on purpose, and that they would need to be very brave while adults worked to keep them safe. Isabella, wise beyond her years, admitted that she had suspected something was wrong, but had not known how to express her concerns. Marcus, confused but trusting, simply wanted to know if he would be able to come home to his father. The confrontation took place on the following Tuesday morning, carefully orchestrated by Detective Morgan to catch Victoria off guard. Rosa returned to the house with the children as planned, maintaining the pretense that their weekend trip had been purely recreational. Victoria greeted them with apparent warmth, immediately offering to prepare their favorite snacks, not knowing that police officers were positioned outside the house waiting for her signal. When Victoria went to the kitchen to retrieve the poisoned supplements, Detective Morgan and her team entered through the front door. They found Victoria in the act of measuring out doses that would have continued the children's gradual decline toward death. The evidence was overwhelming: the supplements, the hidden documentation, the journal entries, and most importantly, the medical tests showing poison in the children's bloodstream. Victoria's initial response was to deny everything, claiming that Rosa had planted the evidence and that she was being framed by a jealous employee who resented her marriage to Richard. However, when confronted with her own handwritten journal and the recorded phone conversations that police had obtained through court orders, Victoria's facade crumbled completely. She admitted to the plot, but showed no remorse, insisting that she deserved Richard's wealth more than children who reminded him daily of his dead wife. Richard arrived home from work to find his house filled with police officers and his wife being arrested for attempted murder. The revelation shattered his understanding of everything that had happened since Catherine's death. He struggled to comprehend how he had been so thoroughly deceived by someone he had trusted with his children's lives. The guilt of bringing a potential killer into his home and failing to protect Isabella and Marcus would require years of therapy to overcome. The trial of Victoria Sterling became a landmark case that highlighted the vulnerability of children in blended families and the importance of trusting those who truly have children's best interests at heart. Victoria was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, with additional charges related to child endangerment and conspiracy. The corrupt doctor who had assisted her received a 10-year sentence and permanently lost his medical license. For the Blackwood family, healing required time, patience, and professional support. Richard took an extended leave from work to focus entirely on his children's recovery and rebuilding their sense of security. He arranged for family counseling to help all of them process the trauma of discovering that someone they had trusted had been systematically trying to kill Isabella and Marcus. The children's physical recovery was swift once the poison was eliminated from their systems, but the emotional healing would take much longer. Rosa's role in saving the children's lives earned her recognition far beyond the Blackwood household. She received commendations from local law enforcement and child protection services for her courage in speaking up despite the personal and professional risks involved. More importantly, Richard formally adopted Rosa into their family structure, giving her legal authority to make decisions about the children's welfare and ensuring that her bond with Isabella and Marcus could never again be threatened by outsiders. The children themselves showed remarkable resilience in recovering from their ordeal. Isabella, with her mature understanding of what had happened, struggled initially with trust issues, but eventually learned to recognize the difference between those who genuinely cared for her welfare and those who might seek to exploit her vulnerability. Marcus, younger and more adaptable, bounced back quickly once he understood that the adults in his life were now completely focused on protecting him. Richard's perspective on relationships and trust underwent fundamental changes following Victoria's betrayal. He spent years in therapy learning to recognize manipulation and developing better judgment about people's true motivations. He never remarried, choosing instead to focus on being the father his children deserved and ensuring that their mother's memory was honored through his dedication to their well-being. The case also led to important legal reforms regarding background checks for people entering families with significant wealth or vulnerable children. Victoria's ability to research and exploit inheritance laws highlighted gaps in protections for children whose circumstances made them targets for financial predators. New legislation required more thorough screening processes and created better support systems for domestic employees who witnessed concerning behavior in wealthy households. Rosa's courage in speaking truth to power, despite enormous personal risk, became a model for other domestic workers facing similar dilemmas. Her story demonstrated that love and protection of children must always take precedence over job security or social status. She showed that ordinary people can become heroes when they choose to act on their moral convictions, even when doing so requires enormous personal sacrifice. The Blackwood family's story ultimately became one of survival, resilience, and the power of chosen family bonds. Rosa's unwavering dedication to Isabella and Marcus proved that love and protection do not require biological connections, only genuine commitment to another person's welfare. Her willingness to risk everything to save two children she loved demonstrated the highest form of moral courage. Today, Isabella and Marcus are thriving young adults who credit Rosa with not only saving their lives, but teaching them the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult or dangerous. They learned that families can be formed through choice and commitment rather than just genetics, and that the people who truly love you will always prioritize your safety and happiness over their own convenience. The case serves as a reminder that evil can sometimes wear a friendly face, and that the people closest to us are not always the ones we should trust most. It highlights the critical importance of listening to those who spend time with our children and observing their behavior patterns rather than just accepting surface appearances. Most importantly, it demonstrates that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort and love over fear. If this tale of courage and protection has moved you, consider the brave individuals in your own life who might be quietly watching out for your well-being or that of your loved ones. Take a moment to appreciate those who choose difficult conversations over comfortable silence, and remember that sometimes the most important voices are those that others might try to dismiss or ignore. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their safety and protection matter, and that there are always people willing to fight for justice when the stakes are highest.